Hey everybody, it's me, just making a new video today. This is just going to be me doing this is another segment on Wrestling Forgotten Gems number 12. Just thought I'd give you a video about that. Well, this is probably going to be like a two-part video. This is going to be me talking about the WWF/WWE Intercontinental title, a belt that's kind of been forgotten, but it's starting to get its credibility back, but some people are still forgetting about this belt because mainly the WWE stopped caring about it, but they're starting to care a little bit about it by having the Chris Jericho and Rey Mysterio feud. But there's only so much that there's only so many matches these guys can have until the point where people are going to get tired of it, although I'm frankly not getting tired of it. But eventually some people are going to kind of get tired of seeing it, and they're gonna want something fresh and something new. But it's still a way to build the Intercontinental title back. But I'm just gonna talk about this belt, about why it's some of the guys who held it, some of the most notable feuds, some of the best matches, and everything about this belt, and why this belt shouldn't be forgotten. Because like I said, before Rey Mysterio. When Rey Mysterio sort of had it and he got into the feud with Chris Jericho, people started to forget it. There's some people who are still sort of kind of forgetting it because there's not many new challengers for the belt. But like I said, they're starting to bring the credibility back because they're having the Chris Jericho Rey Mysterio feud, sort of like doing what the WWE's doing with the tag team division when they were having Edge and Chris Jericho as a tag team to bring some credibility back. But now with Edge injured, it's going to be kind of hard, and I guess there's rumors of them putting the belts back on Legacy, but we'll have to see from there. But let's get started with this video because I don't want to be talking much like that. So the IC title was probably one of the best belts that the WWF had at the time. I mean, there was the WWF title, but there was a WWF title, but mainly the IC title was kind of outshining the WWF title because of some of the most memorable and notable matches and notable feuds with the belt back in the later part of the 70s, going all the way to the early 80s, all the way to the later part of the 80s, all the way to the 90s, all the way to the millennium. And this was the belt that was sort of secondary to the WWF title, but some of the matches and feuds kind of made the belt seem more credible and prestige, to the point where the IC title was kind of like the WWF title, like it was its own separate belt. And this belt had some notable champions, and it had some controversial champions, like champions that many people didn't want to be champions. So we start off with the early champions that held this belt. You had Pat Patterson, who was the first IC champion. He won it in a tournament, I guess, against a young Ted DiBiase before he became the $1 Million Man. I believe it was 1978 or 1979, and he would hold on to the belt for a while before losing it to Ken Pentra. Then you had Pedro Morales, then you had Don Morocco, then you had Pedro Morales again, then you had Don Morocco, and then you had Tito Santana who ended Don Morocco's long title reign. Then you had Greg Valentine, then you had Tito Santana, then you had Macho Man Randy Savage, and the belt just went on and on and on, and you just had some notable and most popular champions. And that's the thing that made this belt so important, and more important than the WWF title, because it would help build guys. It would help guys who went on to become IC champion or went on to compete for the belt. It would help build them to become big stars and actually go on to become in the WWE main event scene, the WWE title main event scene. And then you had stars, like I said, who made a name for themselves or who became world heavyweight champion. Like I said, there was Pat Patterson, there was Don Morocco, there was Tito Santana, there was Greg Valentine, there was Macho Man Randy Savage, who sort of made a name for himself when he won the belt. He would go on to hold the belt for a long time before losing it to Ricky Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat would then lose it to Honky Tonk Man, and what was one of the most controversial victories I ever seen. And then Honky Tonk Man was one of the most controversial IC champions because many people, he had so much heel heat, mainly because people wanted to see him lose and get beat up, so they would go to the shows to watch him get his ass kicked and lose the belt. Then finally he would lose to the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior would hold on to the belt for a long time before he won the World Heavyweight title, the WWF title, and then of course they stripped him of the belt because at the time I guess he couldn't hold 2 titles, so they put it in a tournament. Mr. Perfect won that tournament by defeating Tito Santana in the final matchup. Then Mr. Perfect would hold on to the belt for a long while before losing it to Bret Hart. Then you had Roddy Piper, guys like the British Bulldog, Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, Diesel, Goldust, Triple H, who made a name for himself by becoming Intercontinental Champion on 2 different occasions. One in '96, one in '97, I believe, and then when he beat The Rock for the title in '98. Then you had The Rock, you had Owen Hart, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin in two separate occasions. You had Kent Shamrock, you had Jeff Jarrett, you had Edge, you had Chyna, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, Rikishi, Val Venus, and Christian, Ricky Steamboat, Lance Storm, Kane, Booker T, William Regal, and the list just goes on and on of some of the most notable IC champions who sort of brought the IC title back to its prestige. And that's the thing that this belt was so good for, and why many people were talking about this belt more than the WWE title, because this belt was having some most notable feuds, and this belt was making new stars and making guys were making themselves and making a name for themselves off of this belt. And that's one of the reasons why this belt was so important during the time that when the belt was introduced. And then of course you had some of the most notable feuds for this belt. You had some of the most notable feuds for this belt, which were really important for the IC title, that helped build it and helped many people talk and had crowds talk about it. Of course, you had the Pedro Morales Don Morocco feud. You had the Tito Santana Greg Valentine feud, which was a very awesome feud, and it led to very good matches between the two. You had the Ricky Steamboat Randy Savage feud, which headed into WrestleMania 3, where Randy Savage injured Ricky Steamboat by, I guess, using the bell when he was doing the elbow drop, and he crushed Ricky Steamboat's larynx, like storyline wise, and Ricky Steamboat wanted to get his revenge. You had the Hockey Talk Man and Randy Savage, which was a very good feud, and it had other guys involved in it, like the Hart Foundation and Danny Davis. You had Rick Rude and Ultimate Warrior, which led to Rick Rude ending the Ultimate Warrior's undefeated streak, and led to 2 other matches between the two, which was the steel cage, a one-on-one, then a steel cage, and then of course they had a feud over the WWF title back in 1990. But that feud can be culminated back to the WrestleMania 5 feud. You had the Mr. Perfect Bret Hart feud of who was the best. Then you had Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, of Marty Jannetty wanting to get his revenge on Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, of who was the real undisputed Intercontinental Champion. Razor Ramon and Diesel, Jeff Jarrett and Razor Ramon, Owen Hart and Steve Austin, The Rock and Triple H, Chyna and Jeff Jarrett, Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit, Edge and Christian, RVD and Eddie Guerrero, Randy Orton and Edge, Umaga and Jeff Hardy, and Rey Mysterio and Chris Jericho, who were starting their feud now over the belt. And this was one of all these feuds. My point is, all these feuds were what helped make the IC title what it was, and it helped make the IC title a league of its own because of the notable feuds and the notable matches for this belt. And that's why this belt was so important, and why it played a major factor in building some of the stars in the WWE from the 1980s, the 1970s, the later part of the 1970s to the early 80s, to the later part of the 80s, to the early 90s, to the later part of the 90s, going to the millennium. And that's what this belt did. And then of course you had some of the best IC title matches that this belt had to help build stars. And for that, I'm going to do a part 2 video for that, because I want to have enough time to explain that. So look out for part 2 of Wrestling Forgotten Gems part 12, where I focus on the IC title matches. Until then, stay tuned. I'm out. Peace.